Welcome to Model Rail Radio. I'm Tom Barbalet, and this is being recorded live on Skype, October 7th, 2017. Model Rail Radio is the internet's only live recorded radio show where the topic is the hobby of model railroading. Setting the show up, getting a call from Bruce Kelly. It's been a long time since we've had the chance to chat, Bruce. I'm sure you've got a lot of updates. What's going on with the model railroading hobby in your part of the world?
Wow, there's a lot. I don't think we've talked in over a year.
Gosh.
It's been that long. I've been listening in, but I haven't had an opportunity to come on. Boy, let's see. We're finishing up our 2017 season at the Medford Railroad Park. We got 2 more Sundays to run in October, and then we're done for the season. Our annual train show is coming up. We've moved from the Armory to what they call the Expo, which is a big arena. Mm-hmm. And we've got 3 times the space, which is really exciting. So in the weekend of Thanksgiving, we have our show, and we're looking forward to that. It's going to only get bigger. Let's see what else with me. A lot of stuff going on. I'm part of the Board of Governors for the park now. We're in the process of finalizing the bylaws. And I was just elected to the Board of Directors for the Division 1 in the Pacific Northwest region of the National Model Railroad Association.
Ooh, congratulations!
Yeah, so I've sort of stepped into a hornet's nest there. But, we're looking forward to a great year. Hopefully things will change because everybody
people seem to be saying that. I think there seems to be a sufficient number of new folk that things have to change, right?
Well, I think so, and it's got to probably come from the bottom up because I don't think I don't think National's really listening to us. I think it's a shame that.
Well, it's a new National as well, though. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things. I think that certainly.
Yeah, there's going to be a change in the next year. I guess this is the president's last year, so there hopefully will be hopefully some new blood coming in that will try to make things more palatable for people to want to join. And that's what I'm hoping.
Certainly.
Let's see what else is happening. Well, I've moved. I got rid of the mountain retreat, and we're now in Medford. And I just recently moved all my stuff over from storage into my heated garage. I got a heated garage this time, so I'm going to set up to start doing some model railroading, start doing some modules.
Terrific.
The Model Railroad Club, the Rogue Valley Model Railroad Club, is in this year's issue of Great Model Railroads.
Wow.
Model Railroads. We're one of the 11 layouts that they have. Yes. And what's surprising is the pictures don't even do justice because things have changed in the past 2 years.
Of course.
Since those pictures have been taken. We've got 2 new brothers that are their skill level and their scenery and buildings and everything else that they're doing is way above anybody's ever seen.
Wonderful.
In the past 2 years, they've done about I would say about 16 feet of work. Gosh. And it's just fast, really fast, and it really looks good. So hopefully there'll be more pictures coming out of that at some point. Since I last talked to you, I think I was still working for Microtrains.
You were working for Campbell's when we last spoke.
Okay, so I got laid off from Microtrains, and I'm working for Campbell's Scale Models, which is great. I've been there 2 years now as of this month.
Congratulations.
And it's fun, and I'm having a great time. But I also started working for Microtrains again, part-time. Well, actually, both of them is part-time because I work 3 days at Campbell's, and now I'm working Mondays and Fridays at Microtrains, working with Joe D'Amato.
Very good.
And I'm doing all his resin castings that they do in plant. So he makes up the masters, and I sit there and start the production. And it's challenging because I'm learning a new skill.
Certainly.
And trying to make a good product that's being handed off to the public. But we'll see what happens with that, how far that goes.
Wonderful.
I think that's it. I don't know if there's anything else exciting about the hobby.
Let's explore a few of these things, because
Sure.
you've raised a bunch of new stuff.
Oh, I know what else I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm, as you know, I'm super fan number one on AML Network with Lionel Strang, and I've sort of stepped up a little bit, or he's allowed me to step up a little bit. So I'm jumping in once in a while on some of the podcasts that he's doing.
So you actually had the opportunity to talk with Charlie Getz, right?
Yes, and I will not say anything.
Very good.
I am not happy with the response. I was being very, as you know, we did a interview with Christine and Charlie and Gordy from I think it's the Kingdom of Fife, or I think that's what it's pronounced as, in outside of in Scotland, outside of Edinburgh, I think. And Gordy is a great guy. He's going to be a very wonderful plus to the to media, social media for the National, and I think that's going to work out really well. I was being very diplomatic because I'm a little concerned about what's happening with National. As people will hear in the podcast, the magazine is losing $100,000 a year.
I think the whole phenomena, I mean, I've met Charlie Getz on a couple of occasions. I've given him an open invitation as well. In fact, I was amazed that, I mean, I don't know what behind the scenes Lionel had to do in order to get Charlie's participation.
I think it had to do a lot with Christine, the marketing.
Yes, they have a long and, let's say, storied history as well. So, yeah, it's interesting, actually, because I think my interaction with him, and he's local to me, like, quite literally, seemed to just indicate that this, and his editorials, a number of which I thought were, how would one say it diplomatically? I don't think one can say it diplomatically. I think there were certain things that I found relatively offensive. I think he was able to offend a number of people in the hobby intentionally, and I find him a very interesting character, but as you say, his time is up. And my hope is that new people will come in, and as you say, as we've spoken about many times previously, I'm a firm proponent of the NMRA, but like you note, it comes from these regions that are absolutely amazing. And these little small, groups of folk that clearly have such a vision for the hobby that it is infectious. And I think these people, the NMRA has lost contact with in some regard. But my hope is that a few of them will work their way up. We talk to Jim Gore periodically. But also that the people that work their way up are people that are clearly so in tune. I think of Kathy Millett as well in the UK.
Yep.
Just people that are really smart about how to get the hobby out to as many people as possible, and not about, making money hand over fist, just about getting the benefits of the hobby out to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry.
The controversy that we've discussed on some of the podcasts, and actually, if you look at some of the response, well, you won't see some of the responses, but some of the responses we saw, especially about the magazine, with our conversation with Charlie, there seemed to be a problem, making it economically feasible to have an online presence with the magazine. And one of the issues that came up on the podcast was about security. And the idea that this magazine, if it was free, it wouldn't be a member benefit. But we're looking at it as, well, it's not a question of being free. It's a question of recruitment. Give something out there that's going to have a little more quality to it, even though it looks nice coming from White River.
I think there's what I found, having firstly interviewed the board of directors, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 7, maybe more than 7, the folks that I met there that would not make eye contact with me at the shows following, and all the political nonsense and all this notion that what we were doing was firstly, at least initially, and certainly still very curiously, growth. It's about getting vast numbers of people thinking about this hobby as something that they can do in their spare time. And within that narrative, it's not that the hobby's dying. It's not that, we're talking just about deceased estates. And it's a terrifying thing that, you know, model railroader circulation is down and all this kind of stuff. No, people are just finding new ways of getting information associated with the hobby. And some of these new ways come through electronic devices which weren't around a decade ago. And
That's
I think
correct.
what is fascinating through this analysis is that I found it really strange to be politicized in this fashion. And I found this with Model Railroader as well. I found this in a few locations. Now, Lionel Strang and I have very different philosophies associated with modes of approach here. And I think what's beautiful about what he's done with AML is he's created this kind of id of Lionel Strang in podcast form, which I've been encouraging him to do for many years now. What fascinated me was that he could get these parties together, and someone who has been so heavily and passionately, emotionally involved with the NMRA as Lionel has for 2 decades now.
Yeah, very much.
Kind of distill this thing down in something which is associated with getting to a point of resolution. And, you know, hats off to Lionel and all his efforts, because I think when you talk about thanklessness, some of this stuff is really, I mean, I come from the perspective of having experienced it myself. My view is I'd much rather record an easygoing podcast with a bunch of friends and new callers that come together on a regular basis. The workings of the NMRA, honestly, I've found terrifying in some regard. But in the same side, you've got a bunch of really good people that do amazing work in the hobby where the NMRA is their vehicle for this.
Right.
So it's a complex thing, but yeah.
Well, it's you know, if you really look at it, the national or the whole organization is like a giant model railroad club. If you really look at it, so you're going to have the politics, the stuff that, you know, some people are not going to want to join into, and then they have the divisions, and you have the groups of people below that are really close knit and enjoy the hobby and having a great time, and then you've got a lot of people on the outskirts who again don't deal with the politics, or they don't have the $44 to pay for dues or whatever, that are enjoying the hobby as much. And then there's a whole group of people, and I think it's larger than what they think, that are the lone wolves. They're not in it for other people. They're in it for themselves, and they don't care what somebody thinks about their layout. Joe just told me yesterday, he visited a hobby shop down in California, Northern California, that is a real good hobby. I wish I could remember the name of it. But he was talking to the owner, and it turns out there's 15 guys in Medford, Oregon, that are spending lots and lots of money to get stuff through this hobby shop. And these are 15 guys that we don't know about.
Yeah, exactly.
So like Lionel says on his podcast all the time, he says this hobby is bigger than anybody thinks.
No one can fathom it.
You can throw all sorts of numbers out there, but I think they fall short in what's going on out there.
And the thing about it is that these lone wolf hobbyists, for example, when I traveled in the Midwest, I was primarily meeting academics. These are people who are in their 50s, primarily 40s, 50s, 60s. They were all model railroaders. They all were. Like, this hobby is so much about people, when they have kids, perhaps building a layout or just maintaining a layout. They don't talk to other people. They might buy a copy of Model Railroader once a year. They're happy in the hobby for themselves. They're happy in what they have. They may not be huge profit centers for, you know, variety of manufacturers. No doubt they've got a few Campbell's kits there, no doubt. But, you know, the nature of the hobby is not about centralized communications. It's not like a sporting team. It's not something where you would ever necessarily know that people were interested in the hobby, except, as you say, certain hobby shops, certain, you know, avenues. And what I find fascinating about the podcasts in particular is this is a very passive way. Our numbers go up every Christmas. Every Christmas, people get an iOS device or an Android device or whatever. They see this podcasting thing, and it's Christmas time. What do I think of Christmas time? Trains under the tree.
Yep.
Put it in, find Model Rail Radio. We've got a listener.
Yep.
So my perspective is, until you've experienced the passive nature of the hobby, and, you know, I was quite, I don't know how one would describe it. I guess I looked like some new zealot to the board when I performed in front of them however many years ago. But you'd hope slowly but surely this idea would actually permeate through. And I think what we're finding, actually, is that the folks that are coming up now are now getting on reasonable positions and what have you. Many of them are very aware of the efforts that have been put in. Now, I'm not anticipating, I was hopeful for a few years, but the nature of actually recognizing this as a form of media akin to the sacred publication, maybe, who knows, maybe a few more years. But nonetheless, I think slowly but surely, podcasting also has matured as well as a means of communicating. YouTube has matured amazingly in even the past 5 years associated with the production quality. I was talking with a certain video professional in the hobby, let's just put it that way. And yeah, even in the subscription video service part of this hobby, there are the growth, the spreading of information. It's not being actively tracked, and it's certainly not being actively tracked by a number of the old stalwart aspects to this. I mean, I think what's interesting for the NMRA is just how do they get the folks that are, as you say, these lone wolf folks, to sign up and actually participate in a club? What benefits do they get? I think slowly but surely they're resolving some of that, but it's very interesting times. Nothing is static. Nothing is static currently.
Yeah. And in some of the conversations that we've had and obviously the interview and everything, the other issue that I have with the organization was the fact that based on their financial records, I figured that there's at least probably $1.60 to $2 that are going down to each member. 17,000 members, and what gets down to the division is pennies.
Of course, yeah, certainly.
And so that's a little disappointing. And it would be nice to see a little more money go to the region and hopefully trickle down to some of the...
The nature of the money part of it, though, has always been... I mean, joining the NMRA, and obviously Lionel talks about this quite a bit as well, the nature of flying how many people, 16 people, across the planet in some cases to attend the board meeting plus the national... I mean, the whole nature of the money with the NMRA has always been a topic where, I mean, literally when I've recorded it previously on Model Rail Radio, I've always come back and thought, this is why it's great that Lionel has his own recording to do this, because I've always thought these are really inflammatory topics, and you're talking about a large group of people that seriously love the hobby and are members of the NMRA, and they're not the people I'm talking about here. I just find it the whole financial thing of the NMRA and the secrecy and all this really curious stuff. And I mean, Lionel is a great proponent for actually reading the board minutes and going through the fine-tooth comb and trying to understand some of that. I mean, it's curious, but
I looked into the so-called free trips. Based on the financial information, it amounts to about $35,000 a year. And from what I understand, obviously from talking to Clark Cooney and Charlie, they pay for their airfare and they pay for their room during the meeting. So a lot of the board of directors come in and they may go to the conference or convention and they may leave after the board meeting. So they're not getting a free trip as, the way we talk about it on on Lionel's podcast, but there are some limitations, and it's not a first class hotel. It's a hotel that's close to the airport, so you're not looking at really fancy stuff, especially for the not for the conference, for the convention meeting, but at least for the one they have in February or January. So I don't think I don't have an issue with that.
No, look, I mean, my perspective is that a lot of this could be done electronically. A lot of this could be done through Google Hangouts.
That was one of the things I brought up in the interview. I said, what about televising or having teleconferencing of the meeting so that all members can be privy of what's going on? Or if a board of director can't make it, the excuse that they gave before was that by law, by the state that I think it's Illinois, they have to have face-to-face meeting. Well, one of the guys on the podcast turned around and found out, no, you don't have to have a face-to-face.
Yeah, that might have been the case how many years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, now it's not the case, so they can't use that excuse anymore. So they are working. They've promised that they are working on that, so that the actual meeting will be, other than the closed session, will be publicized to the members. It's a
mysterious thing that there needs to be a closed session. I mean, the whole nature of the way these kind of organizations are run is as soon as you have any form of secrecy, then mysteriously, I mean, this is about model rail, right?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be open standards. There are a series of basic premises that, unfortunately, the NMRA with their secret meetings and, you know, the flights and what have you, I mean, this is an organization, and the building situation, and, I mean, all these things, it's about the local folk. It's about the local folk that get a lot out of it. But, yeah, let's see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years, and let's remain hopeful, I guess.
And it's, you know, it's like Lionel and the rest of us say, that we're not trying to bring down the NMRA. We're trying to build it up and make it more representative of the people that are at the bottom, and make them, you know, upgrade their standards and you know, make things, you know, the AP program, and they're working very hard to bring that up to the new technologies. I mean, we've come a long way since, you know, the old put together wooden stick kits. You know, it's a whole new world out there, and they should be looking at that as far as and the new technologies that are out there.
Certainly. Now we've talked about the NMRA. Let's talk a little bit about from one organization with, you know, various issues technically, you're rewriting the constitution associated with your local club, right? Is that what's happening currently?
Well, what we're doing is, for people who haven't heard the last time I was on a year ago or more ago, the Medford Railroad Park is a unique park. It's owned by the city. It used to be the sewer treatment plant, and they tore everything down. And back in the early 80s, a steam engine, a Willamette steam engine, which is an improved Shea, which ran from Medford to Butte Fort, actually to Prospect, Oregon, on the Medford Corporation Railroad, about 62 miles of it. And I thought maybe 62. I may be wrong on that, but a long distance or a short distance. And they used to haul logs back and forth between the forest and the plants. That engine was being at a park in Medford, and it was being vandalized, and the city was going to either scrap it, or there was an offer from the group up in Portland to get it. And the owners of KD and Microtrains, the Edwards brothers, Dale and Keith, got a group of guys together, and they saved the Medco 4 and got this permission to set it up in the what they call now is the Medford Train Park, the sewage treatment plant, and set up this engine and started a live steam group, the Southern Oregon Live Steam Group, and they had started this park. And for a number of years, we've had a contract with the city that we have now 4 groups: the G-scalers, the live steamers, which is the 7.5 scale or gauge, the full size, the Medco 4 with all the equipment that we have, and the model railroaders, the HOs, the Valley Model Railroad Club. So those 4 groups have a contract with the city that we will open up to the public 14 times a year, which basically is from April to October, the second Sundays, and allow the public to come in. And we do this for basically free. There's no charge to come see this stuff. We rely on donations and the train show that we do, and dues and other things, sales and stuff that we do. So it's a unique situation. Up until probably 2 years ago, they never really worked together. It was always whatever they needed, they dealt with the city, or they dealt with each other. And it sometimes there were fights, and sometimes there was mutual benefit. Like the Railroad Club, when we first they proposed to do it, the 2 clubs that were there, which was the Live Steamers and the Historical Society, forego their profits from the train show to help us build our building. So there's been cooperation and there's been disagreements. A couple of years ago, we had an issue. We have an issue with homeless people, and that we're not talking about people that are, you know, we're talking about people. Most of the people that we have problems with are the 5%, the people who have gone through the system and just they can't be helped. There's nothing they can do because they've got alcohol or addiction problems, or they just want to buy the process of getting better, and for whatever reason, mentally or whatever. So we have a problem with them, and we started what we called the Railroad Park Committee, and it was informal and dealing with other issues. Well, last year I realized that the park is just becoming unmanageable for 4 clubs to do it all in separate ways.
Certainly.
So I proposed that we change the Railroad Park Committee to a board of governors, and we are in the process of running the bylaws through all 4 clubs, so that we become the spokesperson for the railroad park through the city, through the police department, emergency services, and what the board of governors are going to do is deal with all the things park-wide. So if we have landscaping issues, security issues, one of the things we're doing is we're going to have an emergency plan for dealing with all types of emergencies on the park grounds. To deal with the city straight on with our contract, because every 10 years we sign a new contract. Instead of having 5 or 4 different groups or people talking to the city, they can go through one. And it makes it much uniform. Plus, it gives an idea of what's going on in the park. If we have issues that need to be addressed as a group rather than just individual club. And we also are going to deal with disputes. If there's a dispute between 2 groups, then the Board of Governors will mediate to try find a solution. I think it's a thing that's been long coming for making the park a little more efficient and appropriating equipment or assets, and also dealing with the regular everyday operations that we have there, whether it's during the public season or not. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make this group, and it's represented by all the clubs. It's fair, and so far 1 club has already signed on that today. They had their meeting and they voted it in, and as far as I know, the other 3 clubs are going to follow suit, and we will see where it goes from there.
Wonderful. It's interesting, actually, when train clubs have to come together and, discuss issues like homelessness. I think certainly our local Silicon Valley lines now has maybe 10 cars that people are living in, literally outside the front. And it's interesting, actually, that increasingly as the economy changes, the problems of the world are thrust on train clubs.
Well, yeah, I think it's thrust on everybody. We see it all over the area, and it's usually in areas where there's some sort of system in place to help people like that. And then word gets around, and they come to the area. And then, unfortunately, in our conversations with the city, out of all the homeless people, there are 85% that basically they're in the system and they get the benefits, and they have a car. And they get help, and things hopefully change for them. And then there's this 15% or less that they've gone through the system. They're the ones we see. We also see the kind of the people that have the means. They live in a house, and this is where they meet to do their drug deals, to hang out, to do whatever. And unfortunately, this is the group of people that the public sees, because they're the ones that are laying under the trees. They're the ones that are trying to sleep in the park. They're the ones that are unfortunately defecating in the park, which is a serious problem. And they're the ones the public sees, and then word gets out, especially when they're panhandling. Somebody comes to a birthday party.
Yes.
And all of a sudden they're being not accosted, but they're being approached to get money, or they're just being obnoxious. And it unfortunately, it's one of those things like, you tell somebody something bad, then he's going to tell 9 people rather than 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the problems we're dealing with. They just cleared out what we're calling is the homeless condo. They built a structure next to our park that where they would conjugate, and a lot of the people conjugating there were not. They were, I would say, more criminal than they were homeless.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's just a bad rep, and they just cleared them out, and now they're back again. So it's an ongoing problem, I think, with most cities. And it's just unfortunate we have the brunt of, because of our position on a greenway, closeness to some of the facilities that help these people, that we're getting the brunt of the bad part of it, the part that nobody wants, which is unfortunate. And we've tried to help people. As a club, as members, we've approached a number of people that we've seen there, ask them if they needed help, and we actually try. And so far, our record right now is a 0, because usually these are the people that, again, they've gone through the system already, and the system won't take them anymore.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, and I think it's certainly experienced the world over. But in particular, it's funny because what you're talking about here is just open spaces, and open spaces. Anyway, interesting stuff, Bruce. We have a number of new folk on the line, or at least a new folk, and Jim Gifford. So, always a pleasure chatting. Just one last question.
Sure, go right ahead.
Before I wrap this up. Campbell's kits.
Yes.
Perennials, anything new, or is it all basically just perennials?
We're just doing what we've done in the past. The catalog hasn't changed. There's, I think, 3 kits that we haven't put out in actually 4 kits that we haven't put out in a long time. One of them is the bandstand. The other is, I think, a passenger shelter. Wonderful. Those have been worked on, and right now we're waiting for Duncan Campbell to give the approval to finish them and possibly get them back out on the market.
Very good.
Basically, the kits are basically we put out are those kits that have been put out by Leo, back in the 60s. We're there. It's not. They're not knocking the doors down to get kits from us, but we're still putting them out. And we see there's a big influx for some of the older kits, especially, I guess, because of the narrow gauge craze that's going on right now.
Definitely.
So we're doing well, and Microtrains is doing well, too.
Certainly.
Which is good.
Certainly.
Which is good.
Bruce, it's always a pleasure chatting. It's a rare pleasure to chat currently, so don't let another year pass before you call back.
I will not. We should be. Are we coming up on a anniversary or something at some point?
I think we've already passed an anniversary. September was the anniversary, so I'm not sure. I've lost count. It's just many, many years. Who knows how many years it's been?
Well, I thought we were going to wait. We're going to wait 5 years or something, just so your wife won't get sick again.
Well, no. What we're going to probably do is do a show 150. And the thought currently is that maybe I should do it on the East Coast, because I'll be on the East Coast around that time next year. There's going to be a convention that I'm speaking at, plus I'll go probably to the O-Scale National. So maybe the off weekend, who knows? Who knows how it's going to pan out? It always feels really strange to plan so far in advance.
Well, let me know what happens, because I may fly out there, because that's obviously that's where I'm from. So
yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, it was so
do a show
important to show 100 in terms of just the flight traffic control. It's difficult to actually explain to people that didn't experience show 100 how it came together. I mean, just when people came in, and it was just fluid and wonderful. But yes, unfortunately, my wife, my wife did get sick afterwards. Yeah. Got to try to minimize that this next one.
That's true.
Very good.
All right.
Always a pleasure chatting, Bruce. Please stay on the line.
It's a great pleasure talking to you. All right. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome back on a long-time participant to Model Rail Radio, who I think I'll probably be visiting if he's about March next year. You may not have heard this yet, Jim, but I am going to my cousin's wedding somewhere around Wollonga. And I know you're somewhere around Wollonga as well, so my anticipation is, in an off day, I'll go down and see you and Roz and catch up with your crew.
Well, that'd be great. I didn't know. It's the first I've heard of it. So March next year? Middle of March?
Middle of March. The wedding is on the 17th. So my anticipation is we'll be there a day earlier, but it's the few days afterwards that I'll be able to catch up with folk.
So something in the 18th to 20th 19th. Bracket.
Yeah.
18th, 19th.
Yeah, around that time.
All right. Okay. Oh, well, we'll have to see what we can organise.
Most definitely.
And see if we can get you up to see Wayne's layout that we're doing op sessions on, because it's nice long runs.
So in terms of your crew, it's been a while since we last chatted. What's been going on in your area?
Well, we spent a lot of time getting ready for the NRMA National or Australasian weekend, which was here in Adelaide. Didn't go to the conference, but opened the layout up for people to come and look at. And I think there was about 22 layouts across town.
Gosh.
Yeah, some of the clubs and some of the layouts got 0 visitors.
Oh, that's
I
disappointing.
think I might have been. Yeah, I might have been near the top though. I got 19 on the day.
Wow.
And then 2 the following day. And then another exhibitor rang me up and said, I couldn't get there because I was exhibiting. Can I come over? So he came over the next weekend. So
Wonderful.
the total was 23.
Terrific.
Yeah, so we were pretty happy. Lots of positive feedback. And
Great.
and we'd been practicing what would work on the day so that operators could have a bit of a chance to have a chat without stuffing it all up.
Certainly.
So the schedule was made a little bit slack in terms of running time.
Yeah, most definitely.
And it was good because I handed the control of the layout over to Derek for the day.
Cool.
And in actual fact, the next op session coming up Monday week, he's in control again, and I'm going to run the main yard.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Isn't this the dream? Isn't this the dream
Yes,
that you
it
actually
is.
get to play on your own layout?
Yes. It's
Very good.
So, I've been watching YouTube model builders, the Arduino stuff that's being run by Chris Healy
Yes.
from MRL trains. And, I breadboarded up the speedo that they were doing and just showed the boys and said, who's interested? Next thing we know, we've ordered bits for 34 of them. So it's quite a
Wonderful.
thing.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because this aspect of the hobby, the Arduinos, all this kind of stuff, it seems to be a certain group of folk are immediately interested. And obviously, you were working with Terry Terrence, a couple of years ago?
Yep.
Associated with his controller of favour at the time.
Lad. Yep.
Yeah, so I think, you've clearly drunk the Kool-Aid, to use an Americanism, but for those that aren't part of that still signed up, can you talk a little bit about some of their thinking? Obviously they've seen it on your layout, right?
Yes, they have. I guess what I'm going to be doing that's different this time is I'm going to run a clinic, and they're going to build their own. Now, so which means the only thing that I'm going to have to tweak is the code based on the accurate distance when they actually install their detectors, because that being all mathematically based, you've got to have a pretty accurate measurement.
Certainly.
So it's going to be fun. I think I'm playing around seeing if I can get current transformers working for Wayne's layout for his signalling. So I'm actually just working on the stuff by, I can't remember the bloke's name, but if you Google the N scaler, he's got some pretty smart code that he's put together. And the plan is to actually work on that in the next week or two, see if we can refine it. I easily do a locomotive, but it's more about how do you detect that 1.5 milliamps for the resistor axle set,
Certainly.
And that's a lot more tricky.
Yes. So we periodically have a call from Chris Adams, the US Chris Adams, but the Australian Chris Adams, what's been going on with his layout?
We've been doing a little bit of operations, and he's now starting to get into scenery.
Wonderful.
And of course, without BJ, scenery's a bit harder.
Yes.
So we're all struggling a bit with that, but he's learning about not gluing things up too much and all those things, all the lessons that we all go through. Roscoe's actually got the track in on the western wall now, up the top. Where all those big loaded boxes were when you were over. It's cleaned off. He hasn't got his yard design up there yet, but he's certainly got the main line sorted.
Wonderful.
So next few weeks that'll all get put down properly.
Terrific.
And he's planning on having operations next year.
Wonderful. Just in time for my arrival, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we'll see if we can organise something for that.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of running round to everybody's, we'll
just a couple.
You probably obviously 2 or 3. So you want to see, and then we've got to have the obligatory barbecue.
Most definitely.
Hopefully Michelle will come.
Yes. Well, now she's met you all, or at least 2 of you, I think she's realised that I mean, you and Roz do an amazing stand-up routine for folks that are interested, and many have seen it already because you've taken it on tour. So, I think certainly Michelle will. It's always difficult to predict, though. I mean, I think the nature of... We're also doing New Zealand on this trip to catch up with other family members, and it's hard to predict. I mean, it's hard to predict whether Michelle will be absolutely captivated with something, and I think historically she hasn't had a proper opportunity to enjoy the benefits of Adelaide. Like, Adelaide, for us, is just so many family members that I think she was kind of overwhelmed with meeting everyone. And let's see, let's play it by ear, but you'll at least have one captive. You'll at least have one Barbalet captive. So let's see how it plays out.
Okay, lovely. So, what else have we been doing? Those MTH PAs have now been totally gutted, and they've got Mishima motors and ESU lock sounds in them. So it's all been fitted. They've been speed matched. Now I haven't tried them out in the layout yet. So most expensive locos on my layout. But won't be buying any of theirs anymore.
Okay, very good, Chip.
All right. Well, nice to catch up.
Most definitely. Always a pleasure. And pencil me in, and we'll see what comes together.
Yeah. Just to double check, 18th, 19th?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, yeah, I think 18th, 19th are probably going to be the days, so...
All right, lovely.
Keep them fresh.
I'll get it in the diary.
Terrific. I'll talk to you soon, Jim. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
I'd like to welcome on Dennis Drury. Dennis, we haven't had a chance to speak previously. For folks listening in, could you please introduce your model railroading hobby?
Well, Tom, I'm in the process of building my third version of the Southern Pacific Klamath Falls Subdivision. And my wife and I just recently moved out to Dayton, Nevada, where we bought a home, and I have space for layout, so I am unpacking everything out of boxes and building as I go.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, for folks listening in, this is, I think Dayton, you're all on the same level, right? Is this a 2-story house or a 1-story house?
This is a 1-story house. I have, for my layout room, I have 2/3 of a 3-car garage. So I have about a 20 by 20 foot space.
Interesting. So, you say this is the third version. What have the previous 2 versions featured?
Well, they're the same scheme. It's Southern Pacific and Burlington Northern. Between Klamath Falls and Chemult, Oregon, set in 1984.
Wonderful.
And my first version was when I lived in California. That layout was open for the 2011 NMRA National Convention. Soon after that, my wife and I moved to Reno, Nevada, where I started my second version. And after we retired, we sold that house, put all the layout components and a bunch of other household goods in storage, bought an RV, and toured the country for 2 years.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Now we're settling down. We've got a great house on a golf course here in Dayton, and I am building my, what I hope to be the final version of this layout.
Can we talk a little bit about the 2 years? Because my wife and I are about to go on a road trip, a cross-US road trip, which has been a long time coming, but we're really looking forward to it. And historically, when I lived here 2000, I spent a lot of time on the road just exploring the US. What areas did you go to? What railroading stuff did you see? Did you spend, obviously you must have been to Oregon through that period of time, but what other areas did you see where you thought these are places where folks should visit if they're interested in the hobby?
There's too many for the call length you've got set up.
We got a lot of time tonight, Dennis.
Okay.
Give us a few.
Well,
Give us a few.
Here's the thing. We basically did all of the West Coast, all of the South, up into Illinois, up into Tennessee. It wasn't all railroad oriented, but some of it was. We tried our hands at being snowbirds and liked that a lot. Spent time in Texas and
wonderful
Arizona during the cold Nevada winters.
Certainly.
Some of the highlights of my railroad activity was I was able to visit the Greeley Museum in Greeley, Colorado, which if anyone's in the Denver area must see.
Wonderful.
It is a huge model railroad that encompasses my time frame and part of my area. So it was a big draw for me to get there and see that. spent some time in Wyoming. Let's see, there is another layout that everyone who needs to go. It's outside of Sedona, Arizona, and it is the Union Pacific Wyoming Division. Gentleman that is building this layout is a retired rocket scientist and had a purpose-built building. I want to say it's around 3,000 square feet, but I'd have to look at the website to be certain.
Gosh.
And he is modeling from Ogden, Utah to Cheyenne, Wyoming, as it was in the 50s. And just to give you an example, to run a train from Ogden to Cheyenne takes about an hour of real time.
Wonderful.
With no stops. And
amazing.
I was able to participate in several operating sessions there, and I also installed his signal system.
Gosh.
So the website is wyomingdivision.org, all one word.
Wonderful.
And people can go see that. He hosts monthly operating sessions, and twice a year he has invitational op sessions for people from around the country. But if you just contact Vero, who is the owner, he will add you to his list, and the schedule for ops is there. If you're ever in Sedona, even if it's not an op session weekend, you can still drop in and see the layout that he's building.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about the South, because certainly this road trip, I mean, I've been to the eastern part of Texas. I've followed the Mississippi up. I've done that kind of stuff, but certainly Georgia and the Virginias and the Carolinas and this kind of stuff, I don't have a real sense of. What's interesting train-related stuff around those areas?
Well, there are a lot of clubs and home layouts to visit in Texas. Our trip to the South was more snowbirding with friends, so my layout and railroad activities, it was more about playing golf and going to museums and things like that. I'd been to Tennessee before and went to Chattanooga, which is fun, but not necessarily something I'd go back to. I don't really have a good handle on layouts in those areas. But it was an interesting 2 years. I had a lot of fun, and if I had to do it over again and the circumstances presented itself, I would certainly do it. But after 2 years, it was in an RV that was kind of small with 2 dogs and 2 people. It was time to get a bit more space and settle down so I could build my own layout again.
Very good. Yeah, it's certainly something that my wife and I love doing, and we're really going to be testing it with regards to 2 weeks of traveling across the US in November. But yeah, no, we always think, well, we should at least allow for packing it in for, as you say, in the order of a couple of years, just going exploring, because there's so much to see in this country. It's pretty overwhelming for folks that, even considering, 5 or 6 states surrounding people, there's so much to see. But to plan it and to purposefully, get an RV and to purposely travel for a couple of years, I can see, Dennis, this is going to be an ongoing topic for future calls into Model Rail Radio. So let's talk a little bit about your prototype and why your prototype fascinates you so much.
Well, I worked for Southern Pacific between 1977 and 1984. So I have an intimate familiarity with that prototype. I worked in the signal department for a while, and I also worked in the engineering department on a rail detector car. And if you're not familiar with rail detectors, they travel along the tracks at 8 miles an hour using magnetics and ultrasonics to look inside the rail for hidden defects, which can then be fixed before they cause a major incident or a derailment.
Certainly.
So I was able to tour pretty much the entire western part of the Southern Pacific over time at 8 miles an hour, and spent some time between El Paso and Houston and up around Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And you can see a lot when you're going by very slow like that.
Certainly.
We had to clear for every train that came by, so we did a lot of train watching during that time period. And so having traveled over most of the Western SP system, I had a real fascination with Klamath Falls area and the track between there and Central Oregon, between Klamath Falls and Eugene, and having the prototype location I've chosen, I can model Southern Pacific, Burlington Northern, which had trackage rights,
Certainly.
Oregon, California, and Eastern Logging Railroad, and the Klamath Northern, which served the town of Gilchrist. So I can incorporate all of those and be prototypically correct. I have it set up where I've got the trains from that time frame. I have a full-length Coast Starlight that I can run. I've run 25 to 30 car Southern Pacific trains. This is in HO scale, by the way, with 3 to 4 tunnel motors or SD45s on the point. The Burlington Northern trains with trackage rights, they didn't do any work online, but they certainly ran across the trackage. And then having the logging railroad is another benefit. And the reason I chose 1984 is because that's the year that I left work for the SP. There was a thing called Southern Pacific Santa Fe that reared its ugly head, and I was told that when that merger was completed, my job would be gone. So I went looking for other work.
Very good.
Did I lose? Oh, there you are.
No, I'm here. So it's an interesting time period as well, because when people talk about transition era, obviously they're talking steam diesel. But when you have these corporate transitions, as you very intimately experienced yourself, this is another transition, right? In terms of just a changing of guard. It
is. And Joe Fugate models Southern Pacific in the 80s, and my understanding, he starts at the beginning of each decade currently. As an example, the year 2000, he modeled 1980, and then 2001, he did 1981. And when it hits 1989, he goes back to 2000 again, or 1980 again. I'm sticking with that year because I like the motive power. I like the trains. I will not have any speed lettering, so that makes it easy in my purchasing. I know that if something doesn't match my time frame, I'm not going to buy it. Which saves money to buy the things I do want.
Exactly. Very interesting. So, in terms of that area, what kind of industries are in that space?
It's mostly timber related. Southern Pacific and Burlington Northern hauled lots of lumber across that line. The OC&E, the Oregon, California, and Eastern, was a logging railroad that was owned by Weyerhaeuser. So I have that. I have lumber mills. There's some other industries. In Klamath Falls, there's an asphalt distributor that receives tank cars of asphalt and sends them out for road construction and maintenance. But most everything is plywood, particle board, paper. Most of the paper was down in the Willamette Valley, though. So, but the through trains that run over the railroad had lots of paper. Piggyback service, that's part of the I-5 corridor that, for intermodal between the Northwest and the Los Angeles area in the South was part of that. I've researched the train IDs that ran, where they went from. I have photographs of consists. So I think I'm doing a pretty good job of replicating the trains that actually ran and the rolling stock that actually ran.
You mentioned the speed lettering. For folks listening in that aren't familiar with that distinction, what is that?
Speed lettering was when the Southern Pacific and Denver and Rio Grande Western merged. The Southern Pacific adopted the Rio Grande style of speed lettering on their locomotives and rolling stock. It's basically a type of font. If you Google Southern Pacific speed lettering, I'm sure you'll get 10,000 pictures.
Without question. How long have you been listening to Model Rail Radio, Dennis?
Quite a while. I can't really put my finger on when I started, but it was certainly around show 50 and maybe even before that.
Gosh.
It's just that I have never had the opportunity to call in.
Wonderful.
And I happened to be sitting in front of my computer doing something else and saw the email saying you were about to go live. So I wrapped up what I was doing and decided to call in.
Terrific. So in terms of the show, are there any topics that we're missing? Anything that you'd like to be hearing about that we could be talking about?
I don't think so. I think you're doing a really good job, and I like the format of being able to hear from people around the country and around the world and what they're doing and what they're modeling and about their layout. So I think you've got a winner here.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Really appreciate that. Always good to have long time listeners, first time callers. That's always really good. Don't be please call back. Don't be a first time and last time caller, because I think what fascinates me about what you're doing is this is an area that you're clearly very familiar with, but you have a new space, and having lived not in your part of the world, but having lived in Las Vegas and having had a double garage and the space that it shows, there are various thermal and dust properties that also these areas present, which make them relatively interesting and somewhat unique. And I know that there are folks in Florida that use similar spaces with some success, but certainly I remember modeling in Las Vegas. After a period of time, I realized that I was fighting certain elemental forces, which I hadn't really anticipated when I started out. So hopefully that won't be your experience, but I'm interested in hearing an update periodically as you start discovering these things.
When I see a call running and I happen to be in front of my computer, I'll certainly call back.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Great chatting, Dennis. Look forward to talking to you soon. Take care. I'd like to welcome back on Jeff Shockley. Jeff, I received another Delmarva update. The monthly updates are always much appreciated. What is going on with the hobby in your area, Jeff?
Of course, it's getting close to November and end of the year, and so we're gearing up for our open house season, which will be November, December, and January. We're also having a special open house at the town of Delmarva. They're having a fall festival on the 1st of October, so we'll be open up for that also. So we're doing a lot of cleanup.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I am doing a road trip, just a brief road trip to your part of the world as part of a cross-country road trip, but I'm looking forward to actually meeting you in August, September next year, when I'm going to be more in your part of the world for an extended period of time.
I'm anxious to meet you too.
Yeah, no, it'll be great. It'll be great to catch up. And the thing that interests me... Sorry, continue.
I've told... At our last meeting, I told the club that you were going to be in there that in that time period, so they're anxious to meet you too.
Wonderful, wonderful. Always good to be an invited guest to a club that you've followed for. I don't know. I've probably followed Delmarva for at least 7 years now, and I've got the boxcars and stuff too. So yeah, I feel like a much anticipated figure. So I'm looking forward to meeting your club.
Yeah, my first show was show 34.
Very good. Very good. So in terms of the hobby, I mean, obviously you do the newsletter for Delmarva, but when you go and work on the layout, what kind of stuff are you working on currently?
I'm helping a gentleman, one of the other members. We're scenicking the Athens, Ohio area on the layout.
So in terms of Ohio scenery, what kind of stuff are you adding? Houses,
trees, basic scenery.
Very cool. Very cool.
The other guy's doing most of the work because I can't get down there very often. But when I do, I try to help him out as much as I can.
Wonderful. So in terms of the other clubs in your area and the other things that you do, I mean, obviously you work with the Scouts too and these kind of things. Anything in the hobby coming up for you as well?
Well, again, in November, the club here in Dover, we're having another we're having an open house. The end of November, like for National Model Railroad Month. We have a merit badge class scheduled for March of next year. So I'm gearing up for that. We're getting things set in place, even though it's 3 or 4 months away. We don't want to get I don't want to wait till the last minute to get things done. So that's basically about it. Because we read the First Day Club was at a show today over in Clayton, Delaware, for Clayton Railroad Days. So we had an actual train on the track for us that we could tour. So that was neat to see.
Wonderful, wonderful. And how many people were at that particular show?
When I left, we had 75 people see the layout.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sounds like a good day.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a good day. I had to leave early because had a family commitment. So I was there for about 3 hours and staying in those 3 hours, 75 to 80 people came through and saw the layout. So we consider it a really good day.
Definitely. Well, Jeff, it's always a pleasure catching up. It always seems to be a bad signal, but it's always a pleasure catching up and hearing what's going on in your part of the world. And I'm looking forward to meeting you and your crew next year. But also, I think I have a mind's eye view of your part of the world in terms of just the area. And it'll be nice to actually be there and meet you all on location.
I'm looking forward to.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So it's a short show, folks, for Model Rail Radio this evening, but an interesting show. Lots of different bits of discussion. Great to have a chance to meet Dennis and hear about his particular railroading interests, and always good to catch up with Jim and Bruce. I mean, these are two stalwarts in Model Rail Radio, and always wonderful to catch up with friends. I'm really looking forward to getting out to Australia in March as well, and catching up with a number of folks. So, for the folks for listening in, thank you very much for listening in this evening, and thanks to the folks for participating. Good night.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Good night.
All right, Tom.